Excited to present to all of you today to talk about how we can use electricity to interface with our brain to enhance cognitive abilities, learning abilities in people who are otherwise healthy. And then for people who are suffering from some kind of disorder of the brain, to potentially use electricity to help people who are suffering and not being treated well with current therapies. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so I went to medical school down the street, and it didn't take me long to realize that we live in a really special time, that the medical therapies that we have access to now are incredible, and many things that would have killed us 100 years ago, we don't even think about today, right? Like pneumonia. We generally don't think about pneumonia. We take an antibiotic and we go back to work the next day. It's no big deal. The bubonic plague killed 100 million people. These days, Yersinia doesn't kill anybody. Who knows anyone who's died of Yersinia? We don't even know about Yersinia, right? It's solved. So we live in a really special time. But I was a neuroscientist before going to medical school, and I was really excited to learn about therapies for the brain. And I was incredibly disappointed that the miracle of modern medicine really didn't apply to neurotechnologies. Okay, so I want you to think about that as we go through these slides. So this is the way we treat the brain today. Okay, we just talk therapy. So this is cognitive behavioral therapy, seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist in an office, often for an hour at a time for weeks, months, even years. And this is great, it works. But it scales terribly. It's a very one-on-one interaction. It's often in person. Nobody wants to drive to their shrink that often. It's often expensive, and it's often reserved for more mild cases. Okay, if you're severely depressed or severely anything, talk therapy often isn't going to work. And then there's drugs. And we're going to talk about drugs a lot, but drugs is a flawed system when applied to the brain. Drugs, you're expecting this little molecule that you take by mouth to be absorbed into your bloodstream through the gut, to run a lap across your whole body, to be pushed through the blood-brain barrier, and what small amount makes it through, that little drug, it doesn't know where to go. It just goes wherever the blood pushes it, right? It goes all over the place, when it really only needs to go to a small part of the brain for a small part of the time to do its job. So think about all the wrong places a drug goes to before it actually goes to the right place. Think about all the friendly fire that's happening before it's actually doing its work, the work that you want. Okay, so you don't need to be a biochemist to understand this. Okay, this is a fact. Like the pharmaceutical model, when applied to the brain, is flawed for a lot of different reasons. And that's why you see, I'll challenge you, like any drug primarily targeting the brain, the list of side effects is almost as bad as the disease it's trying to treat. Okay, so we've all seen these headlines. I mean, these headlines are almost like global warming headlines. They happen so often. It's just constant bad news. I mean, Adderall is practically ubiquitously used amongst young people, and it is not this drug that you can just take casually. Many people who think they're taking it casually end up taking it for much longer than they anticipated because they don't feel like themselves when they're not on it. This is a scheduled medication, so you need a special prescription to get Adderall, and yet we think it's so benign, or at least young people do when it's not. Okay, so here's another example, and I mean, the antidepressant use in the United States has gotten to the point where we might as well put it in the drinking water. Remember, there's only 300 million people in the United States altogether, and 15 million of them have been taking an antidepressant for 5 years or longer. That's crazy. Okay, So that brings me to electricity. Okay, so electricity, so the brain is, like we've known, it's an electrical organ. We've known this for thousands of years, so this is not a news flash to anyone in this room. But what if we were able to use electricity as medicine, right? Like, maybe we would be speaking the brain's language if we spoke to it through electricity, right? Now, it probably doesn't apply to this room because I saw some really crazy stuff upstairs. Many people, when they hear about electricity in the brain, they think about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They think about using ECT as punishment, like this happened in our country. And so there's this like mental overhang of really like negative connotations when you think about electricity applied to the brain. But if we just forget about that for a second and think objectively, and let's also pretend for a second that this thing called the pharmaceutical industry didn't exist, and this pad of paper that the doctor has always didn't exist, and the pharmacist didn't exist, like this whole machine of distributing drugs to us didn't exist, and we were to start over, maybe we would start with electricity, right? It just makes so much more sense. So this was an idea that, I had lots of ideas in medical school, but this is one of those ideas that really stuck with me, and I ended up basically spending my entire professional career exploring this concept. So let me show you one example. So this is a gentleman with Parkinson's disease, and you can see the tremor. This gentleman is implanted with a neurostimulator. You can see the pulse generator in the chest, and all of this equipment is under the skin, so you can't tell cosmetically that it's there. And then you see an extension cable that goes through the skin of the neck and then into the brain. In this case, the subthalamic nucleus. So this is the same gentleman literally seconds after you turn on the neurostimulator. Okay, and this may seem really interesting, but this technology has existed for about 25 years, so this is also not that new. But this is amazing to me, right? With Parkinson's disease, you can treat it for a few years using dopamine-type drugs. But eventually, the side effects of the dopamine outweigh the benefits that the patient is feeling. And so, sure, it works for a little while, but not forever. And we have this technology that uses this little simple electrode, and the electrode is in just the right spot, and leaving everything else alone, the rest of your body, the rest of your brain, it's only going to the spot that it needs it. You turn it on, and this happens. Okay, so this is a company that I work for. Right before Halo, this was the company I was at. And here we developed a neurostimulator to treat epilepsy. So epilepsy is a big problem worldwide. It's 1% of the world. 1/3 of people with epilepsy do not respond to medications. 1/3 of people with epilepsy have side effects so bad that they choose not to take their medication despite being, quote, responders. So 2/3 of people with epilepsy are not being serviced with drugs. That's a lot, right? So we came up with this device where the pulse generator in this case is implanted in the skull, and you connect a couple of electrodes, and they're surgically implanted into so-called seizure focus. So this is the area of the brain that's causing all the seizures. And our system's really smart. It's listening to the brain's electrical activity, and it can detect when a seizure is about to happen, but before it clinically manifests. It's like finding a forest fire when it's still a match. And when we detect a match, we can deliver a small electrical impulse to the brain to then put out the match. So in this case, put out that electrical activity that could spiral out of control and become a seizure. All right, so I'm happy to report that several years ago we got a unanimous approval, a unanimous vote for approval. And this device is now in clinical practice, helping thousands of people with epilepsy in a way that was previously inconceivable. Okay, so this is all great, but to be critical of my last company, nobody wants that middle picture. Nobody wants that surgery, and to be critical of this, nobody wants this surgery, right? So I thought for this field to really break open and to really have the societal level impact that I envisioned, we've got to build it into a form factor that is not surgical, okay? A form factor that's so-called non-invasive. So I scoured the literature, and what I found was there was a couple of German scientists working on a technology that's called transcranial direct current stimulation, or TDCS. And it involves placing electrodes on the scalp. So that's important, on the scalp, not in the brain. Okay? Turn on the stimulator for 20 minutes. And then what that does is it stimulates this temporary state of hyper-plasticity, or you can think of hyper-plasticity as hyper-learning. Okay, and this temporary state lasts for about an hour. And then, since you know where you put the electrode, you know what brain region got stimulated. So you can deliberately practice, exercise that part of the brain. And if you do, you can learn faster. That part of the brain can learn faster. From your hard work that you put in, you can get more out of it. So I thought this was amazing. Okay, it's external, right? Doesn't involve surgery. We can stimulate these states of hyperplasticity. We know where we put the electrodes, so we know which brain region we should exercise. And now here we have this model, this very practical model of retraining your brain, encouraging it to learn in the direction that you want. So, you know, at the time there was a growing body of literature, and scientists around the world were picking up on this and using it in all the ways that I thought were the ways that, you know, we could really affect society. So in otherwise healthy people, we can help them. The data showed that you could help them learn faster in like movement learning, which I'll talk about quite a bit in a minute. There are also cognitive benefits if you stimulated more frontal. In people who are sick, we can use this same concept to help people, say, recover from a stroke faster, or to retrain their brain so that they're not constantly mired in negative thinking, aka depression, and other psychiatric disorders. So, so this looks at the volume of publications over time. So, you know, when we founded Halo in 2013, you know, we were right in the middle of this, or the early signs of this hockey stick, and it continues to today, which is really heartening. So another important thing, it wasn't just labs getting data, it's non-scientists getting data. So the military was using this to train drone pilots and snipers and accelerating the rate at which they learned this skill by 2x. So all of this got us really interested, and you know, this slide really illustrates the opportunity. I love this equipment. This is not meant to be critical, but this is meant for a scientist. Yeah, obviously. So myself and Brett Wingeier, who's my co-founder, we said, he was a longtime friend and colleague from NeuroPace, and we said, we can make this into an elegant wearable. It doesn't have to look like this. So let's start a company and let's build an elegant wearable such that anybody could benefit from the powers of neurostimulation, right? Like why let's make this a democracy. So this is actually version 2 of Halo Sport, which we first started selling. Well, version 1 came out about 3 years ago, and version 2 came out at the start of 2019. But this is a motor-cortex neurostimulator. We don't call it that because it would scare the heck out of consumers. But looks like a regular set of headphones, and it does play music, for those who are wondering. It always cracks me up. I'm showing you a neurostimulator, and people ask, does it play music? But it does. But this is what makes it unique. So these are electrodes. These things, these prongs are an electrical connection to a circuit board stuffed into one of these ear cups. And it's got its own battery. It's got a Bluetooth chip. So this neurostimulator can talk to an app on your phone, and that's how you control the neurostimulation. We're extremely scientific and data-first company, so there was lots of testing that preceded this, so I don't want to go into this too deeply, but there's a lot on our website, and I'm happy to chat data till the cows come home after this talk. We got lucky with Neuroanatomy. There was a lot of data around motor cortex stimulation for movement learning enhancement, and when it came time to build the device, we were just, this was just really fortunate. The motor cortex goes ear to ear, right over the top of your head, perfect for headphones. And we've made a lot of progress since going live, lots of amazing people using our technology. So again, this is motor cortex, so think about learning movement faster. People who practice movement for a living or for their passion, these are our people. So obviously athletes, but also the military. Musicians is probably our fastest growing user group, and also esports. We make a ton of cool videos. Movement is just the beginning. Like I said, we've always envisioned this as a platform, so where we are today is stimulating this part of the brain with Halo Sport, and again, it's for athletic training, musical training, military, so on and so forth. We're also interested in other parts of the brain, so same technology, TDCS, but just move the electrode. Move the electrode, so same electricity, but move the electrode to a different part of the brain. And in this case, it's a terrible acronym, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, for really amazing cognitive enhancement. So, there's data in the literature and some that we've replicated that shows attentional benefits, focus, and with great focus and attention comes beautiful things like memory. So these are, you can look forward to the company Halo exploring opportunities in other parts of the brain. So as a doctor and as a medical device person by training through NeuroPace, we really, really, really want to see Halo technology be moved into the clinic. Some specific use cases, so looking at stroke rehab. So again, someone who's had a stroke and can't use their hand anymore, what do? They do physical therapy. They do movement as medicine. So just like an athlete, why can't we help a stroke victim with their physical therapy? Pair neurostimulation with movement practice, get more out of that practice. All right, so I'm about to get the hook. So just a couple things to think about. So imagine if we can learn faster. Okay, imagine if we had a new way to treat the brain more effectively with less side effects. What new heights could we achieve as a society? And with that, I thank you.